What is up, my Pro Design Builder family? I'm Sam, also known as the Pro Design Builder. I'm the best in the business, and it's not even close. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be going over the subject topic how to hire the right contractor for your project. This particular subject topic is near and dear to my heart for obvious reasons. If you know anything about my story, you know and understand how and why this subject topic is so important. This group is specifically for real estate investors that are looking to make the transition into new development projects and they don't know where to start. I'm Sam. I'm going to be your guide, right? So, a little bit of backstory before I dive into today's training, right? So, a little backstory about me. I got into the business by happenstance years ago. My wife got into med school, and she told me she didn't want to go. And then she handed me a book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I dove into that book and I really tore it apart. And then from there, my love for real estate really kind of grew, right? But things really transitioned for me when I did my first flip, right? And I tell this story often, and because it left such a it resonated so much with me, is because on my first flip, I hired a contractor. Things went south with him. I fired a contractor. I hired another contractor. Things went south with him. I fired that contractor. I hired a third contractor, and I luckily there was enough meat on the bone on this particular project that I was able to get through the project, and we still made profit, right? But what happened is I learned a very good lesson. I learned that this business has contractor problems, right? And if you are a real estate investor, especially if you're transitioning into new development, the stakes are a lot higher, right? So you have to make sure that you get this particular thing right because it could make or break you as the developer and making sure that the contractor is right for your project, right? So first you got to understand what are you hiring for, right? And here's some of the keys that you need to know and understand what you're hiring for. You're not just hiring for labor, right? So most people think that they're hiring a contractor just for labor, but that's not the case, right? So here's the traits or some of the of a good contractor and what you're hiring the contractor for. All right, you're hiring for leadership, you're hiring for systems, you're hiring for communication, you're hiring for experience, vendor partnership, you're hiring for scheduling, risk management, municipality, navigation, and team coordination, right? That's why you hire a contractor, right? So most people, depending on their experience level, will have never navigated the ins and outs of a building project. So you hire the right contractor. That's his job is to execute on that and bring that level of value to your project, right? So a contractor is like having a great quarterback, right? And if you have a great quarterback, guess what? You could probably run the ball and you could pass the ball. But if you have a bad quarterback, you probably could only run the ball. And guess what? You're probably easy to stop, right? So football terminology is probably very easy for me to kind of relay why you have a good contractor versus a bad contractor. But here's some of the things that a weak contractor creates, right? And I just want you to pay attention to this, right? A weak contractor creates delays, budget overruns, failed inspections, liens, stress, poor communication, and legal problems, right? So that bucket right there is not a bucket you ever want to be in. Right, you never want to be in legal issues. You never want to be have investor money trapped into a bad relationship with a contractor because it could literally turn your job upside down, right? And you don't want to have that taste on your mouth as an investor. So it's that important that you understand how to hire right the first time, right? So let's define what your project is before you hire. Absolutely important. And this is an area where I feel like investors really miss the ball. So you have to really define the scope of work, right? And for me in particular, what I like to do is I want to separate the design portion versus the installation and the sticks and bricks and stuff like that, right? And the reason why I want to do that is I let the designer handle all of that aspect. I don't get the markups, right, attached to the actual design and the material. And I get to know exactly what the exact price is going to be based on my selections, right? But the other reason why I do that is when I put together a scope of work for contractor A versus contractor B versus contractor C, I'm really comparing apples to apples in this moment, right? In this time. Once I specify exactly what the scope of work is, I when things are convoluted, and what happens with most contractors, they put assumptions into your projects, and the assumption could be material A is, $6 a square foot versus material B, which is, 9. And what happens is your project becomes very convoluted. And most contractors know and understand that the consumer is making decisions based on price. So guess what happens, right? You don't want to spend that much. He doesn't he's going to come at the lowest price possible, and then what happens is you're going to select them and then he's going to run amok, right? So it's a bad circular relationship that I've seen in this business that lends to bad contractors stepping onto your project because they know that you're going to make decisions based on price, right? So you can't make decisions based on price because there's the saying, the cheap come out expensive. I can promise to you 100% of the time, the cheap will come out expensive if you hire the wrong contractor, right? So specify the exact scope of work for that contractor. And then also too, know and understand what but realistic budget ranges are, right? Know and understand how much it costs to install tile versus wood, right? Know and understand how much it costs for bathroom installation or drywall or framing, right? Be a student of your craft and know and understand exactly what realistic budget ranges are. So now you're not as susceptible to, hey, I'm just gonna pick the lowest price that the contractor gives me, right? Sometimes what happens is a contractor might come to the table with a price so low that there's no way that they can execute on that. But what they're banking on is vague language in their contract or missing items to make the price increase, right? So, but you're not going to go for that, right? You're going to be way more thorough and understand exactly what your budget ranges and the language needs to be in your contract, right? Also, too, know and have a a target timeline for the execution on your project. Absolutely important, right? Because anytime your project runs over, it's going to cost you more, right? It's a mathematical thing. If your project goes over on its time frame, it's going to cost you more money, right? So know the timeline, and also to know and understand the finishing levels, right? So a level 4 finish on a drywall is completely different than a level 5 finish on a drywall, right? Level 5, we go over with a skim coat over the whole drywall surface. We sand the whole thing down, whereas a level 4, we might just go over the tape lines on where the joints meet and then smooth that out, and it's a completely different finish, right? So know and understand what level types and know and understand how to ask for what levels of finishes are being used, right? So, for example, Home Depot paint versus Sherwin Williams versus Benjamin Moore. Those are three different qualities of paint, three different levels of finishes, and you need to know and understand what am I getting for the price compared to each particular contractor, right? And then also too, know and understand the delivery method. So determine whether it's going to be a general contractor, or you're going to just use specialty contractors, or you're going to use a design build firm, which is, full in-house, right? That's what I do. I'm a full design build. I handle everything from concept to completion, with everything inside of my network, right? So that gives me a bunch of control, and also a bunch of understanding on how the moving parts are moving and then what's missing. It tells me exactly what is missing every single time. So know and understand these different types of contractors and the services that they provide is going to be absolutely important for you to selecting the right contractor that's going to fit your particular project, right? So I'm going to go over the 5 things you must verify to make sure that you have the right contractor on your project, right? So the first thing that you need to verify is the license, right? Is it an active license? The what classification is the license, and do they have any disciplinary action attached to their license? Absolutely important for you to know. And you don't want this to fall through the crack. Don't just, trust a screenshot or something that they deliver. Go on the uh, DBPR or whatever state agency that's in your particular state, and look up that license number and verify and make sure that that license is active, right? So some of the red flags that you need to look out for, right, is, my license is pending, right? That's an absolute red flag, right? I used another guy's license, right? That's a red flag too. But that's not a complete flag, because my current company, I have a qualifier for my company. So you're not going to deal directly with the qualifier himself, especially when depending on the size of the business. So that's not necessarily a full red flag, but knowing understand the differences and why that's important is going to be important for you, right? Um, you don't need permits. All right, that's if you move a sink, if you touch a vanity, if you touch cabinets, if you replace a sink faucet, if you replace anything that's structural, you need a permit, right? I know that's the case for Florida. Anything that you touch needs a permit. Outside of flooring that's not in a bathroom, then you don't need a permit. But if you're touching any doors or anything like that, they consider that structural, because it attaches to the framing. You need a permit, right? So if you hear things like, oh, I could do this kitchen, or I could do this thing, and you don't need a permit for that, you better verify, because you probably do need a permit. So that's a complete red flag, right? So another thing that you must verify their insurance. Absolutely important. And don't just verify their insurance by just looking at it. Make sure that they have all the insurance coverages that are needed, and also have you attach as an additional insurer on their policy, right? Make sure they got workers' comp, or if they don't have workers' comp exempt. But you do need to know that to make sure that, hey, does he have his guys on this project? Who are the guys that are going to be on my project? If there's not workers' comp, there is some liability there that you need to know and understand, right? Does he have a garage liability? And if you're the builder, do you have a builder's risk policy for this particular project, right? So you want to make sure that all of these things are verified, and you reach out to the insurance company and verify that this insurance is absolutely active, right? Then you want to also make sure that the experience level matches the project you're looking to execute. I can't tell you how many times where someone will go, "Oh, I know a GC," right? Yeah, you know a GC. He might be a friend of a friend's, but does he build spec homes? Does he build two families? Does he build the type of home or the type of project at the quality level that you're looking to do, right? If the answer is no, and you want to know that he doesn't just do, interior trim or something like that, it's going to be important that you match the experience level to the type of project you're looking to execute on. Absolutely important stuff, right? How many projects like this have they completed? What was the budget range? What challenges came up in this particular project? Can I see completed projects? And there's also permit history that you could kind of look up and see what this contractor has done in the past, right? So the reason I like permit history is permit history will also tell you who his subtrades are. And are they great executors? Do they pull a lot of permits? Do they do a lot of projects? It's going to be important to know who the subtrades are. They're going to be attached to this general contractor that's going to be on your project, right? Then also too, you want to verify financial stability, right? So how are our draws handled? How are change orders handled? How do you manage material deposits? What suppliers do you work with? Are your all your accounts current? All these types of things are going to be important for you to know because it tells you who you're dealing with, right? If he has a lot of outstanding accounts, then that means that he doesn't pay his bills. And guess what happens at the end of your project? You get stuck with the lien, right? And you don't want those type of problems attached to your project, right? So here's some red flags that you need to consider. Ask for a huge upfront payment. Never give a contractor a huge upfront payment, right? So for me, I used to handle big upfront payments. And the reason I handle big upfront payments and I did it that way is because, there was a guy that was a mentor of mine. He said to do it that way. And because we literally handle all of the material purchases attached to the project. So up front, we're putting deposits on all these things, and before we get to our rough is the start of the project all the way till we get to our rough, we are using that cash to get to that particular point. But now I don't do that. Right now, I get to um, certain milestones in the contract, and I want to get to those milestones before it triggers a different payment, right? So because you are handling the material separate, there's no way that you should be issuing a big upfront draw amount, a big upfront payment on your particular project, right? So one of the things that you may want to consider, depending on it, maybe 10, maybe 20%, and have it specified exactly what it's going to is going to be absolutely important. But nailing down exactly what the draws are. So now we know we get to this milestone, and I just can't just come up to you and ask you, hey, listen, I need another payment, which sometimes happens, but you need to get to your milestone, right? So let's keep it to what the words are on the contract. Let's get to the milestone, and then we'll issue a payment promptly once we get to the milestone, right? So be wise and be consistent in that, and don't allow them to run amok when it comes to payments on your project, right? All right, so consistently blaming cash flow, right? So cash flow is a big thing in this particular business. The contractor is not going to finance your project, but having and knowing and the draw schedule and based on milestone is going to be important in minimizing cash flow issues, because if you get to if it's scheduled right, then you shouldn't have cash flow issues. So borrowing from one project to fund another, big red flag, right? Contractors often bounce from project to project, right? I would even ask the contractor, how do you manage many projects going on at the same time? How many crews do you have? I know specifically for me, once I put a guy on the project, he's there from start to finish, right? We don't move guys around on different projects, but you need to know to ask these types of things so you know and understand what to expect from that particular red flag, right? Also, too, communication systems, right? How often do they provide updates? Who is the point of contact? Do you use project management software, which is absolutely important for you to know the day to day of what's going on a project? And then how are change orders handled, right? And here's how change orders should be handled, right? It's discussed up front, it's executed on, and then once it's we execute the change order, it's paid for up front right away, right? So there's no change in the original contract. The change order is specified in language and is paid for up front. You should never be paying a change order after the fact, right? So there's a number of different things. Yes, sometimes contractors are not that organized, right? And they do need to square up certain things. Don't let that happen, right? I would put specific language in my contract that says if there was not a change order executed on or agreed to, we're not paying additional for any additional work items, and then I would put the amount of days, into the future that is good for, right? So I can't stress enough how and why contractors are the way that you select the contractor will make or break your particular project. So, very important stuff. So, hopefully, you got a lot out of this particular training. I can literally talk about this subject topic all day, every day. And I want to see people more active in this group. I'm wearing my Let's Build hat. All right. Tell me what you think about this gear. I'm going to be giving this out to the most active group member this month. So make sure that you're participating. Make sure that you're commenting. I'm going to be giving this hat out to the most active group member moving forward. Outside of that, have a great day.